All right, guys, so we've got 3 of our 4 squares ready for our fruit. And today it's time for us to find out about the very last one. Now, after you finish this part today, if you haven't finished any of the others, you can go back. If you need to see the video again, that's totally fine. So let's look at what our information is for today. All right, so we are looking at pop art. Now, pop in pop art stands for popular. So in the 1950s and 60s, after people came back from World War II and the economy started to boom, you saw a lot more things available and a lot more stuff in popular culture. And it wasn't just like, oh, I have to have this. Like, you needed to have, things like Oat Bran or toilet paper, or it became a lot more of the things we think of as extra items or specialty items, like comic books or cheap novels or magazines. Now, one of the most famous artists in this time period was Roy Lichtenstein, and he was famous for using those styles of comic books to communicate what he wanted to communicate. So you'll notice a couple of different things. One of the things you notice is he's got Ben-Day dots. So Ben-Day dots are this series of dots that are printed finely across a space to create a secondary color without having to use an actual fully mixed color. So like if they're printing a comic book, it makes it easier for them not only to get several different tones using just red ink, but it also makes it so that the page doesn't get super saturated. And you'll also notice he has bold colors in bold areas of his things. You can also see he uses bold areas in the black lines to help you sense the movement. Here are some more. Another thing you see really frequently in pop art is onomatopoeia. Now remember, onomatopoeia is words that are sounds, like zap, zing, shazam, crunch. What we're going to do is we are going to create our last square in the style of Roy Lichtenstein. So we're going to think about some sort of explosion or some sort of detail happening around it. We're also going to think about using bright colors. At least one area in your fruit needs to have Ben-Day dots. And then we're also going to go in and create a thicker line in different locations. So let's see what that looks like. We'll exit the full screen and we'll come back here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see where it will help me to thicken up my black lines. Now, you may feel really confident doing this. If you don't, then you could start with a pencil. So I might say, you know what, I want this to thicken, and I want this one to thicken. And I think I'm going to let it come and get thicker around the side of this. Okay. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go in and go ahead and do that. Now, one of the things you will notice about pop art is that it's very defined. There aren't a lot of sketch lines, and there aren't a lot of loose or squidgy lines. It's very hard-edged and very concise. So I'm coming in, and I'm using my shadow so that those black lines have a consistent depth instead of using the black marker, because its black is not quite the same as a Sharpie black. Okay. Now, once I've got this, I am going to go and I'm going to create some sort of action for my fruit. It might be running away in a cloud of dust. It might be exploding. It might be like, oh, like celebrating. Maybe there's a nuclear reaction. Maybe there's some sort of wave. Maybe it's bouncing. I actually have several different movements and thoughts that you can check out. They'll be in your folder. So like, if it was splashing into water, it might look something like that. Or if it was spinning around, maybe something like this is more appropriate. Or if it was dashing off into space. Or if it was going to be some sort of wave crashing over it. So those just give us some ideas. I think I'm going to do mine where it's like splashing down in water. So before I go in with my Sharpie, I'm going to come and I'll draw that. And remember, those are there in case you need them. You might be able to think of something slightly different. But remember, what you're going for is like a comic book action, a movement. I'm going to give the water some kind of lighter areas, those shines. And if I want to, I can add that onomatopoeia in there. So if you wanted it to say, splash or skadoosh, you can add that in there. I think I am going to add a slight bit of a word. I'm going to make mine a little bit curved around. Now the other thing I could do is, if I wanted it to be more than just my print and I want it to be a little bit thicker, I can come and create a bubble around the outside of the letter that follows the edge of that letter, so that I'm making myself essentially a bubble letter. It's nicer and bigger, and it'll go all the way around. So here I go. Once I have this, then I'm going to be ready to trace over what I've done with Sharpie, because we want those nice, bold, hard lines. All right, I'll see you guys in just a second. Okay, now that I've got it worked out where it's all Sharpied, I am going to go in and erase my pencil, especially since those letters I traced around them instead of right over the original line that I made, because I want you not to know that I used that technique. I want it to just be like, oh man, she made a cool bubble letter. That way the emphasis is on the shape that I'm looking for, not how it got there. Alright, now we're going to go in and we're going to use markers to add color. There's a couple things to think about. One, that I know one area of this needs to be Ben-Day dots. That might be my fruit. That might be something in my background. Okay, so one area is going to use that technique that we talked about, where you've got small dots. Now you'll notice they're not just boop, boop, boop. This pinprick dot doesn't work. What you need is to draw a circle, move down a little, draw a circle. So you're just drawing circles. And you don't want to push down hard on the marker. It's not like, oh, I'll just push on the marker and make it work. So you're drawing those circles, okay? And then you can also use a spot that is fully colored in, so full fill with color. Or you can also do the last thing that was really common, which is using stripes to fill a section. Now, the only thing you absolutely have to have at some point is the Ben-Day dots. So let me go ahead and see. You know what? I think I want to do this blue splash solid, and then I think I'm going to do the Ben-Day dots in the background. So let's come in. We'll use purple. Now the most common colors that you see in pop art are red, yellow, and blue, plus black and white. But you don't have to stick with those necessarily for this, especially if you're trying to be a little bit more accurate with like the color of your fruit. But that doesn't mean that you have to be accurate with the color of your fruit if you don't want to. If you'd rather go all primary and use your red, yellow, and blue, then that's totally fine. Alright, I'm going to finish creating this and then I'll let you see it. Alright, so here it is, all finished. You'll notice we have a section with Ben-Day dots. We've used bright colors. We've used thickened, bold lines to help emphasize certain parts. I also decided to come in on that splash I did and add some thicker, bold lines to give it a shadow. And I also decided to use the stripes. Now you'll notice when I use the stripes, they're thin and they're close together. One of the things you want to consider is how it looks overall. You also want to make sure that you've filled in that space completely. Even if you're using dots or stripes, it should go from edge to edge of that space. So now, when I put it all together, I've got 4 different styles of art, and I have a full 4 square fruit. So, next thing that's going to happen is you'll be gluing these down on a black sheet of paper. You can leave a little bit of space in between, and you are ready to rock and roll. Alright guys, have a fabulous day.